Okay, I think we'll get started today. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to our Last 8% Culture Livecast. My name's Adrian. I'm the marketing manager at IHHP. Myself, along with my colleague Olivia, will be supporting this afternoon's livecast. And first and foremost, we'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. We very much appreciate it, and we're thrilled to see so many of you here and ready to participate. Now, before the presentation begins, I'd like to tell you a little bit about who we are at IHHP. So IHHP is a global leader in culture development and emotional intelligence, having worked with numerous Fortune 500 organizations, government bodies, and academic institutions worldwide. And our new Last 8% Culture System, which is built on 25 years of research and designed to address organizations' most urgent workplace demands, allows leaders to embrace difficult last 8% situations and build your culture in months, not years. And you'll learn a lot more about that today. And today's livecast, as you know, is really focused on the 3 myths of culture and building a high-performance culture. And leading us in this transformative journey today are IHHP's partners and global keynote speakers, Bill Benjamin and Dr. JP Pawliw. Bill has been delivering keynotes and workshops to IHHP's top clients for over 20 years, holding degrees in mathematics and computer science. Bill takes a practical and scientific approach to understanding how the brain performs under pressure and leveraging this to increase leadership and performance. Bill has over 30 years of business experience and has provided his expertise on leadership and the last 8% to diverse groups from many high-pressure environments, including U.S. Marines, NASA, and even surgeons. So glad to have Bill on board. And JP is our co-founder of IHHP and the author of the New York Times bestselling book, Performing Under Pressure. He's a visionary who has spent 25 years researching the variables that drive performance in the workplace. JP has worked with some of the top organizations in the world and combines real-world business experience with cutting-edge ideas to help take your team and organization to the next level of performance. Now, during today's livecast, we encourage you to post any questions or comments in the chat box, which can be found along the bottom menu of your screen, as you all know from posting your names and your country. Now, without further ado, I'll pass things over to our speakers, JP and Bill.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, Adrian. And by the way, it's great to see some names of clients of ours and people we know. It's nice to see my mom here. Hi, Mom. No, I'm just joking. My mom's not here. But great to be here, Bill. And where shall we begin?
We might want to begin with what the 3 myths of culture are.
Sounds good. All right. So this has been a challenging time, no question, for so many people. And what we want to present to you today are some ideas around really human behavior. We want to challenge you to become a student of human behavior. Why? So you can, live happily, but do great work, create a great culture in your organization, and so that you win. It's hard. There's a lot going on today, and it's hard. And so what we know, and by the way, thank you everyone who filled in our assessment, our survey before we started. But from that survey, we know that you've got an intention, right? You are on here for a reason. You want to innovate. You want your organization, you need your organization to innovate. You need it to do things differently because your customers are changing. You need to change as fast as your customers are changing. On top of that, you got to move fast, right? Haven't we ever had a time when things have moved as fast as it is today, right? With AI and all of these different changes, how can we move to keep up to our customers, to the environment, to the economy? And finally, a big thing that you said in the survey is you're worried about your team. You want to keep your team. You want to keep them engaged. You want to keep them doing great work. And so in a sense, you wake up in the morning, whether you're explicitly aware of this or not, with this intention, but something gets in the way. And that's something that gets in the way.
Just before you go on,
yep.
The other thing that I hear about in people's intention is they want to retain and engage, right? There's a war for talent, right? There's a 8 to 10 year mega trend that is, we're going to be fighting for great people, but at the same time, they want to drive performance. They want to give performance feedback and hold people accountable. And that feels like, how do I do both? How do I hold people accountable without losing them? So I think, we also heard a lot from people about that balance. It's always hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That feeling. And as a leader, I feel the same thing. I want to drive results, but how I drive results matters, because I don't want to demotivate people. And I think that's what you're describing, Bill, which is a great point. And so, kind of what gets in the way of our being able to find that balance, right? Results and relationships. Well, again, this is from you, but your people are maxed out, right? They are just so, busy. They feel so overwhelmed. Organizations now are more lean than they've ever been because of COVID. And so they're sometimes doing two jobs. There's this deficit of trust where now, they've got new people in the organization. They're less in person. And so it's almost like their culture is changing, but maybe nothing's been done to work on the culture yet. And so it's caused a deficit of trust. And they're also not feeling as connected, again, because they're less, kind of present in the office. And so you have people, pockets of people avoiding doing difficult things that are absolutely required if you are going to innovate, if you're going to move fast. Do you want to add anything to that, Bill?
Yeah, actually, Melody asked a great question. She said, what makes it worse, the trust this year specifically, in your opinion? And I know for me, it's this combination of what's right here on the screen. It's people feeling overwhelmed and busy, yet we're more hybrid, we're more virtual. So there aren't those opportunities to connect. There aren't those opportunities to work out an issue before it becomes a big problem. There aren't those opportunities to build those connections and relationships. And so I think it's that combination. And this bottom part where what happens is people end up avoiding the difficult stuff, and then you end up with this toxicity and this lack of trust.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And so, but we want to go a little deeper still to kind of understand what's getting in the way. And so this brings us to kind of the three myths. And the first one is that culture, because people now are thinking, okay, we've got to rebuild our culture. That's what we hear a lot of. We have a whole bunch of new people. We're not necessarily together, but we've got to figure out how to build a culture, because trust right now, there is a deficit. So let's work on culture. But there's a bunch of myths that we're seeing in our research. And by the way, we survey 40,000 people a month. And we're going to talk to both that research, but some that's very specific to culture today. But this first myth, culture is driven by values, because we hear that in organizations. And let me tell you a story. Ethics, integrity, doing what's right for customers, those are pretty good values. I think you'd agree, right? I mean, when you think about it, boy, I'd like to think that we could live up to those values. What's interesting though, when organizations feel pressure to hit results, when teams feel the pressure to make their numbers, when individuals feel like, gosh, I don't want to miss again at the company meeting, not being a high performer. I want to hit my numbers, and we're all just competitive. What happens is that in spite of ethics, integrity, doing what's right for the customers, you can have people who feel the pressure to hit results no matter what it is. Wells Fargo is a great example. These three values are their values. In the same year, 2 years ago, where they created millions of fake accounts to hit their numbers. And so what we would suggest is that it's not the values that drive culture. And that's a really important idea. But we're going to get to what drives culture, but it's not your executives going away for a week and coming up with 3 or 4. And by the way, sometimes I see 7 or 8 values. By the way, 7 or 8 values, nobody can remember 7 or 8 things. Forget that. But going away for a week does not do it. That's not what drives the culture in your organization. So we're going to come back to this. But number one, it's not, what's on the wall. So what is culture? Well, culture is the invisible stuff. That's our highly scientific way of describing culture. It's the invisible stuff that drives behavior. What do I mean by that? It's the invisible beliefs, values, assumptions. And again, we're going to dig into this a little bit more, but it's the invisible. That's key. And again, we'll describe kind of more of what I mean by that. How is culture formed? Now, this is kind of the important part. I want to tell you a story. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was asked to work with a senior team. There was a new CEO brought in. They had competed internally with another individual. The two of them worked great when they were peers, but as they moved to more of this kind of relationship, things started to splinter. In fact, it got so bad that they thought it wasn't going to work. That's why, quite frankly, they brought us in. So I'm working with the two of them, coaching each of them, work with the whole senior team. I coached the two of them to have a conversation. They had a conversation. They came back to the individual coaching sessions. And I asked them, independently, of course, but I asked them, how'd it go? They both said, really bad. It didn't feel salvageable for them. The only thing they could agree on was they would like me to mediate a conversation between them. And it would either act as a kind of a Hail Mary, maybe we can salvage this, probably not, or an exit conversation. So, a week later, this is pre-COVID, we're in a room, 3 of us, 2.5 hours, and it finished. I think it was reasonably productive. We go to the individual coaching calls a few days later. And I asked each of them independently, how'd it go? And they both said, oh my gosh, so much better. We think this can work. And I was like, wow, that's fantastic. Then I asked a question that really drove the last 7 or 8 years of research at IHP. I asked this question, did you say everything you wanted to say to them, to the other person? And both of them immediately answered, yes, absolutely. Now remember, I'm coaching them. I know all the issues. I'm in the room. They're not saying everything they wanted to say. So when I pushed them, I said, really, you said everything you wanted to say? And then both of them agreed. They kind of thought about it and said, okay, maybe not everything. So I asked them, what percentage, a bit of a quants guy, what percentage did you leave out? And they both said probably, more than 5%, maybe less than 10 or something to that effect. And that was interesting. And we thought, I wonder what percentage people leave out of a difficult conversation. So we did our best to quantify it, studied 34,000 people. And we found that we noble human beings with really good intention, when we get to a hard conversation, let's say Bill and I are having this conversation, I get to 75, 80, 85% of what I want to say. When I get to that last 8%, that hardest part of the conversation, the part that has consequences for Bill or for anyone we're talking to, an interesting thing happens. Bill sees where the conversation is going. He gets triggered, gets emotional. I get infected by his emotion. And as opposed to continuing on into that conversation, this is that balance Bill was talking about earlier, striking the balance between results and, people engaged, but also giving people tough news. As in that moment, as I'm going into the last 8% and I see him, kind of starting to get upset and I get infected, as opposed to stepping in, I back off. I avoid. Now, here's the problem. Bill can't read my mind. He doesn't know I had the full that I didn't have the full conversation. A month later, we're in a meeting and, he's still doing the thing I thought we talked about. I'm wondering, what are you doing? It's all nonverbal. He's looking at me going, why are you being so passive aggressive, JP? I thought we're on track. The problem is we never had the last 8% conversation. George Bernard Shaw said the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. It never took place. And yet we think it did. And this is a problem because this is part of what forms culture. Before I move on to the next slide, Bill, do you want to add anything to that?
No, go ahead. I have a comment on the next slide.
Okay. So the last 8%, it's the hardest part of the conversation that we leave out. And of course, we didn't end just there. We added to that research. It wasn't just conversations. What we found in our data is that last 8% is not limited to conversations. It's also those hard decisions that we put off. Priority decisions, people decisions, who to include if you're a senior leader, who to include with new information. There's a number of decisions. And in the same way that we avoid that last 8% of a conversation, we avoid making that tough decision rather. We hope it goes away. Of course, it doesn't. And the problem, of course, is that there are consequences. And so do you want to add something here, or do you want me to continue on?
Yeah, no, just around the decisions.
Sure.
I mean, I think we all have the experience of those tough conversations and not really stepping in, not really saying what needs to be said, or as we'll talk about later, making a mess of it. But I think sometimes it's those decisions. And for me, when I was first learning this, I would sometimes let who was ever going to scream the loudest influence my decision, because I didn't want to deal with that. So again, emotions are infectious. So for those of you that know IHHP's emotional intelligence work, emotions play such a strong role in this. It's what causes us to avoid, or sometimes again, what causes us to make a decision that maybe isn't the best decision because we don't want to deal with somebody who's upset. So I just find that this last 8% applies so well to decisions as well as conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot at stake. So think about it, right? Where are we at? You've got this intention, right? You want to do great work. You want to keep your team engaged. You want to keep your team. You want to move fast and innovate. But something gets in the way. The hard stuff, the last 8%. And there's a lot at stake. What's at stake? Well, number one, our reputation. What do I mean by that? Well, there's something called the cortisol effect, right? Cortisol is a stress hormone. It's got many effects. One of the effects is that it sears in memory in a more profound way. So you can be highly effective 80, 90% of the time. But when you get to that hardest conversation, that hardest decision, if you're not as skillful in that moment, there's a greater consequence. There's an outsized influence of that moment because everyone has more cortisol in their brain. And because they have more cortisol in their brain, whatever decision you make, behavior you engage in, sears in memory, right? So in that moment, whatever you do is what sears into their brain, becoming your reputation, right? That's the important part. It's almost like unfair. You can do so well, but now under pressure, if you don't do as well, it affects you, and it does affect you. Organizations are really bad at deciding who gets promoted, who gets hired, quite frankly. That's just the truth in the literature of selection. And what drives a lot of decisions around promotion is something called salience, like what's most salient in the manager's mind, not merit, but what they remember. And that gets driven by what happens in these more difficult moments. And so for you in your career, it behooves you to say, hey, how can I be better in these moments? Because they'll have such an outsized influence on my career.
Yeah.
And so,
and Jamie, I mean,
go ahead.
This is the reason why you can do something right 9 times out of 10, but that one time you mess it up, that's what everyone remembers. So again, you think of values, a lot of clients have respect in their values, but that one time you shoot off that nasty email because you're frustrated, and the other person felt disrespected, that's what they remember. So when we say like what establishes, culture, it's not the values written on the wall, it's how people behave in these last 8% moments, because that's what people remember.
Yeah. And it's all part of that cortisol effect. And so, number one, it's to our reputation. Number two, it's to results. What do I mean by that? Well, guess what? Your competitors are facing the same last 8%, different maybe, but they're facing their own last 8% situations. You don't need to be perfect in the last 8% in that hard stuff. But if you can be a few percentage better than your competitors, guess what? That's going to become a point of difference, right? If you can have hard conversations, name inconvenient truths, so you really serve the customer, do you think you're going to move faster than the other company who you compete with who are avoiding those last 8%. Absolutely. And again, I want to add in, you were awesome in answering our survey. And so we aggregated, this part of the survey, we aggregated all of your findings together. So this is you as part of the larger group that's here. You sometimes show up exceptionally in the last 8%, right? With energy, excitement, engagement, right? You're collaborative, you're motivated, you're patient, you're organized. This is you at your best, right? Sometimes you really do deliver in those moments, right? Maybe more than just sometimes. And there's an impact on people, right? It's easier to accomplish your goals. There's a sense of purpose. There's a bandwidth to meet people where they are and work with them, right? Creates a certain mindset and attitude. And there's an impact on results. You work better as a team, right? The speed to resolve issues increases. These are your words. There's more impact. Great things happen. Now, the truth is we also sometimes show up less exceptionally, right? Where we're frustrated, frazzled, not really at our best. And so we show up distracted, more negative, less tolerant, more passive aggressive. Let's say if we aren't having that last 8% conversation, it can cause us to still communicate it, not obviously very skillfully, but we can be withdrawn. We can get into victim mentality. We're not as visible. So this is all of us. By the way, this is you, this is me, because we're both of these people. And the impact on people are that it tends to make them defensive. Can they hear us name an inconvenient truth? Do they want to collaborate with us? We know people are driven away from an organization because of two things: the relationship with their manager and the culture on their team. And so, if you're showing up and you're a people leader or a manager, that can cause good people to leave. And the impact on results are, less speed and just less ability to kind of get things done. And so how we do in the last 8% affects our reputation and our careers, right? Do they want to give you a mission critical project if they think you're not going to dig into the hard stuff? Of course not. Our reputation. It also affects our results, as we can see, right? We're not going to move as fast. We're not going to be as innovative. So just remember, you're not the only one that faces the last 8%. And in fact, what I'm hoping at the end of this hour is that you sit there and go, oh my gosh, last 8%, yeah, they're hard. Yeah, I want to avoid. Yeah, our team, our organization might avoid it. But I want you to see it differently, not as something to avoid, but actually as your biggest opportunity to transform. We see the last 8% as an opportunity to transform our reputation, our results, and then our culture, because that's what's at stake in the last 8%. And so I want to dig into culture a little bit, right? Bill mentioned this. What you do in a last 8% moment, because of the cortisol effect, affects your reputation, but it becomes the invisible signal to say, hey, what behavior is acceptable on this team? What behavior is rewarded on this team? You can have values on the wall, but it's what you as a people leader do in those moments that communicates, that creates that invisible signal that says to everyone, and creates the stories in an organization. And by the way, that story, if it's diametrically opposed to your values, like Wells Fargo, it becomes even more powerful. And by the way, if it's in alignment with your values, it becomes even more powerful in a positive way. And so the real test of culture is what you do and then what your team does in difficult situations. Bill, do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay. So what's the hard stuff? We want to make this interactive. So we're going to ask you to go to the chat, and we're going to ask you, in your organization, what are the difficult last 8% decisions, conversations that people in your organization regularly face? So just kind of, brainstorm a little bit. Go to the chat. We'd love to see, what you see in your organization as kind of the hard stuff, like list out what you see as the hard stuff in your organization.
Yeah, and Melody said someone violates an unstated norm.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right.
Or accountability for an ill-defined expectation.
Yeah.
Teresa, not taking accountability for a lack of work, lack of respect.
Yeah.
Andrea, performance conversations are no longer working, and it's time to make a cut. We talk about coaching up or coaching out. Yeah, Casey, client escalation conversations. Carolyn, sharing accountability and leadership buy-in. Again, you're going to hear us talk about this idea of having cultures that are high in accountability and high care, right? You need both. Sheila, promptly addressing issues as they come up, not avoiding, right? Because then they build up and they become toxic. Yeah, Katie, I hope I pronounced your name right. When expectations aren't clearly communicated. I mean, clarity is the antidote to anxiety when we're unclear or uncertain. And again, Dr. Vita talked about accountability, right? And yeah, Sean, just having to talk about behavior, that's so uncomfortable. It's so difficult. Thanks everyone for sharing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we'd like to go one step further now. We'd like to go and do a breakout. We're going to put you in twos, and we want you to talk about what is a difficult last 8% situation that you're facing right now, or maybe have faced in the last little bit. We're going to give you 5 minutes. This is an opportunity to take a little bit of a risk. So we're going to ask you to just step in and talk about some of the things you just identified, quite frankly, but think of one that you can share with your partner.
All right, well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know a few of you got left in rooms with people who apparently didn't want to do a breakout room. Sorry about that, but Olivia worked her magic and got everybody connected. What we really wanted to do is just give you all an experience of what it's like when we deliver a session like this. Because we love doing workshops and we like to make things interactive, and we don't want it just to be a one-way communication of information. We want you guys to connect and learn from each other. So we want to do a breakout just to give you a feel for what our workshops are like. All right, so back to JP. Let's keep going. We're talking about this idea of these last 8% conversations as really what the last 8% decisions, conversations, they're what define culture, not just your stated values.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. One of the things that we don't always get is that we're in our own minds and we think we're alone. In fact, there's a term in psychology called terminal uniqueness, where we terminally think we're the only one going through an experience, and we're not. And so you probably found in doing the exercise, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. And it's true. And so the question is not, do you face this? You do. Do your competitors face this? They do. It's, can you be a little bit better because of the consequences? And so that's the question I want to ask you right now. Just reflect, where could you improve? Is there a conversation that you're not having? Is there a decision you're putting off? Is it because you, like me, want to be liked, quite frankly? That's a big driver, right? The emotions that we feel. This is really important. People default to protection, not risk. On your team, people default to protection, not risk. That's their natural default. That's why you got to work extra hard on your culture so that people feel safe to take that risk, to name that inconvenient truth. That's why culture matters right now, that we get better at it. So let's understand a little bit of what's going on inside of us. Again, challenging you to become a student of human behavior. What do you do when you're under pressure? We have two principal ways that we predictably default, ourselves, in terms of protection, not risk. One is we avoid. 68% in our data, we find avoid. I'm an avoider. Why? Because I want people to like me. Or we make a mess. We come on too strong.
Yeah, and I'm more a make a messer. And by the way, I was sharing this and somebody said, oh, actually, I avoid. Then I blow up and make a mess.
Yeah. And so the key is that if you don't know what you are, how can you find a strategy to get better at it, right? It's like what we do with Olympic athletes. Know your default, know your pattern. Because if you know your pattern, then you can do something about it. All right, so myth one, let's just go back. Myth one is that, culture is driven by values. It's not. It gets driven by what happens in these hard moments because of the cortisol effect that drives the signal to everyone on your team. This is the behavior that's acceptable. This is the behavior that's rewarded. That's myth one. Myth two, culture is mainly about engagement. Now, look, I understand why people have this myth because it's just, first of all, true that culture drives engagement. There's no question about that. But it's not the only thing, right? We know that when you have a poor culture, 70% of the time, people don't speak up when they see something wrong, or they think, I have an idea that could help, but they remain silent. Think about innovation. Think about moving fast when this is the case. Right? We know that 65% of people would forego a pay raise to see their manager fired. This is about culture, right? What's acceptable? If you got managers who the invisible signal that they get is that it's okay to be, command and control, then you're going to have people leave. This is the point that I really, and by the way, even for you, again, thanks for filling in the survey. 8.3% of you said strongly agree that I'm thinking of quitting my job. And this is, if you're on this webinar, there's a whole bunch of reasons that you will self-select here. Generally, you're more engaged than the average. Think about that, 8% of this group, this cohort on this call. That says something. Here's the point. If you have a really good strategy in your organization, it will be copied. And even faster now with things like AI, it will be copied. So strategy is not a form of competitive advantage anymore. Product, you can have a great product that's adding great value. And guess what? Again, because of things like AI and a whole bunch of other reasons, that can be copied. It can and will be copied by your competitors. The only thing that you have as an area that can be an enduring competitive advantage is culture. Culture cannot be copied. You now know why. It gets created in the hard moments through the stories of what happens in the last 8%, which is unique to you. And so that is what you want to grow, because when you have organizations that have strong cultures, like are at the top of a robust, strong culture, at MIT, Donald Sull found they outperform their industry, specific industry, by 80%. They return 4 times more than the S&P. So the myth here is, yeah, culture's, great for engagement, but it's not just engagement. It's about results. It's about the things you're measured on. And this is really important. When we can get this across to people in an organization, they start to get it, right? Especially because Bill mentioned there's a war for talent coming. We're actually in an 8 to 10 year mega trend right now because of demographics. So culture, if you can get out front right here, right now, that'll give you an opportunity to win when it comes to people, win when it comes to, yes, engagement, but win when it comes to results, innovation, quality, having those hard conversations where you really meet your customers' needs, where people will put up their hand and say, I disagree. Or, hey, this is what I heard from a client today. All right. Let's dig into culture a little bit. If it's such a, a competitive advantage, let's talk about what we found in our study. We did a study of 72,000 people. And I want to outline that to you now. These are the 2 pillars that we found that are really critical. Number 1 is high connection. And that's that emotional connection where you feel connected to a degree that you can really trust that person beside you. This is where you have a high level of psychological safety. Now, what we found is that it's not just enough to have high connection, high psychological safety. In fact, if you have too much of that and not this next quality, that can become a barrier, which we'll describe in a minute. But the second big pillar is high courage, the ability to skillfully do hard things. That's all about the last 8%, as you can imagine. It's all about learning, how do we manage our brain under pressure so we can step in where it's uncomfortable. You need to norm for your organization that we will be. In fact, we need to be uncomfortable if we want to be a high-performing culture. All right, so let me give you our map. And this to us is like something we're pretty excited about because it's really getting traction with our clients. It's a 2x2, courage on the vertical, connection on the horizontal. If you're in the upper left quadrant, where there is courage to name things, but there's low connection, we call that a transactional culture, right? This is where results matter more than relationships. And of the avoid or make a mess as a predictable default behavior, there's more make a mess going on by the manager in the team. And because of that, people, they don't feel like they want to take a risk. They don't want to, speak up. And so because results matter so much, the team has to endure toxic bad apples. What do I mean by that? That one person who's got a horrible attitude, but they're kept around because they deliver short-term results. And let me tell you, you let one toxic bad apple hang around, if you're not decisive with them, they will bring down the performance of the team by 30 to 40%. And I've found this twice in my career. I kind of didn't deal. And honestly, it doesn't make me feel very good about myself, but it sure has an impact on the teams that I was running at the time, potentially decreasing performance. The groupthink in upper left is people are afraid to speak up because they don't want to make a mess, right? Like they don't want to get kind of reprimanded. They don't want to get penalized, right? And so they don't speak up, and it creates high anxiety, high burnout. So that's upper left, transactional. Lower right is where you have high connection, low courage. We call that a family culture, right? It's a nice culture, but it's unwilling to do hard things. And this is where you have more of the avoid side. So the manager is more of an avoider, and people model that behavior, right? Or they are naturally avoiders themselves. It creates mediocre standards, low accountability, slow decision-making. The groupthink here is not upper left. I'm afraid to speak up because I'm going to get punished. It's lower right. I'm afraid to say anything because I don't want to upset others. This is where you sugarcoat conversations and sugarcoat communications. Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, JP. For a lot of the clients I work with, that slow decision-making is such a big one because in a family culture, you want to try to include everyone. You want to try to make everyone happy. And yeah, you want consensus decision-making, but taken too far, it just slows everything down. So that's a big one that I hear from clients about the challenge of family culture.
Absolutely. And by the way, we expect, and I'll share some of our data, but we expect there to be more in the lower right, because if 60% of us are avoiders, remember that data we mentioned a few minutes ago? That means more of our teams are going to be in lower right. Bottom left is low courage, low connection. I don't want to talk a lot about this, but it's very similar to the upper one, but it's upper transactional, command and control, low risk taking, but it's really about inconsistent behavior. Sometimes there's courage to name, something, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's care, sometimes there's not. But people, again, have to endure toxic bad apples. Why? Because they deliver short-term results, and that's what matters. And of course, you know what happens to people. Talented people don't want to stay. Which leaves us to the upper right-hand quadrant, when you have high connection and high courage, and we call this a last 8% culture. This is characterized by two real important pillars, high accountability and high care, which means I'm going to be clear, like people know exactly what's expected of them and they're held accountable. But how they're held accountable is with high care, is with empathy, but it's still delivered. That's the key. I coach coaches, NBA, NFL, Olympic coaches. The best coaches I work with really find this balance, kind of like what you were saying earlier, Bill, finding that balance between, hey, I got to get results, but I've got to, don't want to demotivate my people. So there's some balance in there. And what we know is that high accountability and high care is what drives trust, right? That's the recipe for trust, which is what is going to get you the risk taking. That's going to drive innovation. It's going to drive people being creative, right? It's feedback rich, right? People name inconvenient truths. It moves fast, right? There's this balance. It is about results. We're organizations. that need to, if we want to be high performing, we have to get results. But it's through relationships. So it's this balance of the two. And this is what gets us that high experimentation and innovation. So as you're looking at this, I want you just to kind of think to yourself, where are we? And specifically, I want to tell you the 3 key behaviors that really drive how all of this works together. Because at IHHP, our goal is to help you grow your culture in months, not years. And there's a number of ways we do it, but one of the ways is to have as little information to have as big an impact, because your people are so busy. And so there are 2 behaviors are on the connection. That's people feel valued and have a voice. And there's one behavior on the courage dimension that we really focus on feedback. Now there's more for each, but we want to, again, bring it down. So it's voice, it's value, and it's feedback, VVF. So when you're in the upper left, people don't feel valued. They don't have a voice, but they certainly do get feedback, not always skillfully delivered. Bottom right, people feel valued and have a voice, but they don't get feedback. They're walking on eggshells a little bit because they don't know where they stand.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, when the average, and underperformers aren't getting feedback, not only are they not getting better, but it frustrates the top performers.
Right. Great point, Bill. Absolutely great point. Lower left is people don't feel valued, don't have voice, and get inconsistent feedback. And then upper right, people feel valued, have a voice, and they get feedback. It's feedback rich. It goes both ways. So again, I want you to sit here and I want you to think, where's my team? Where's my team? And let me give you some of your data. Again, thank you for filling in the survey, but we find that this is your data. The transactional was 6.1%. For all the people who took our survey, 6.1% of you felt like your culture on your team was in this zone. 18% in fear-based. 51% in family, which doesn't surprise me again, because more of us are avoiders. 24% of us in the last 8%. So the question really is, where's your team and how can you move them to the upper right-hand quadrant, which is about results, but it's about relationships as well. Any comments on that, Bill, before I push on?
Yeah, just that, even for organizations we work with who are already in the last 8% culture quadrant, continuing to stay there and actually moving higher into the upper right is a game changer, right? That's like good to great, A to A plus.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to consistently be there, that's a really great point. So that's where you want your culture to go if you want to be all that you can be as an organization. It's about results. Culture is your way there. So I want to get,
and again, coming back to the myth, it isn't just about engagement. It's critical, but too many organizations, when they think about culture, when they think about values, they only focus on engagement. They forget the courage. They forget the doing hard things.
Yeah. So final point. So you might have in your organization CEOs and CHROs who actually want to grow their culture and see that right here, right now is the time when you need to do it. And yet here's what we see. They think, okay, I've got to own culture and we got to do a whole culture rollout across the whole organization. And so I want to dispute that a little bit. So culture exists across organization. Well, let me tell you, in some of our research, you can have 2 floors in a hospital system. They can be doing the exact same work, right? Let's say oncology. And they have really the same staff that moves between floors all the time. They show up, they might be on floor 1, they might be on floor 2, right? Again, doing the same work. They have the same values on the wall. They're in the same hospital. And yet they can be 2 completely different cultures. One, and we've seen this, driven by high discretionary effort, people going out of their way to help others. Even when it's, they're on a break, they go out of their way. There's a camaraderie. And there's a sense of real purpose to what they're doing. And on the other floor, same staff, same values, same work. It's the exact opposite culture. They are not very helpful to each other. They don't go out of their way to, make sure that that everyone has everyone's back. And what's the only difference? The only difference is that the managers stay on their floors. They're the ones that don't move. They are the people who create the culture on their team. And that's part of what we want to get across to you right now, right? Culture does not exist across organizations. Culture exists on teams. And that's actually wrong. Culture doesn't exist on teams. It exists on teams that have been together long enough. And even that's wrong. Culture exists on teams that have been together long enough, that have been through difficulty, that have been through tough times, because that's how culture is created. That's how you know there's an invisible signal. And so if you have a new team, I bet each one of you have been on a new team at some point in your life, and you feel a little anxious. How is this all going to work? What is the culture on this team? Do people like me? Can I take a risk? And especially if you're in a lower power position, even more so the anxiety ratchets up. And here's the point, you want to use your hard situations, your last 8%, as the opportunity to build culture. They're going to happen anyway, but why not build the skills so you can actually use that to grow the high-performing organization that you want? So how to build culture. We don't have a lot of time left, but the insight here that I really want you to walk away with is that CEOs and CHROs should not own culture. I mean that. They've got to be 100% committed, and there's a whole bunch of stuff around that, but it exists on teams. So you want to work at the level where culture exists, which is the team level. You want your managers, your people leaders to own it. That's number one. Number two, you want to give them the capability to model and own. They are modeling culture. Just like we model for our kids, they are modeling for their team. So you want to give them skills to be better in the hard moments, because that's when they model. And then you want to give them a structure to own. And so that's, the learning that we do. So if you were to work with us, we would give your people leaders, because that's the unit it needs to work at, skills to be better in their last 8% so they can model. And then we'd give you a structure to own culture on their team. Where we're not involved, they have this kind of really cool, we call it a 4-week sprint, where they can own the culture on their team.
And JP, my experience is that managers love this. I was doing a program for Home Depot, and I got stuck in an ice storm in Portland, and 3 other guys from Home Depot got stuck there. And so we ended up going out to dinner. And when I was explaining that we were going to give them the tools to own and deliver and facilitate the discussion with their team so they could own it, they were like, oh my God, you're going to help me bring this culture stuff to this courage and connection stuff to my team? Like, I'm not a facilitator, I'm not a trainer, I don't know how to do this, but you're going to help me do this. They were so excited and so passionate about it. I mean, 95% of 80% managers, they want to model, they want to own, but they just don't know how to do it. They need the structure and the tools.
Yeah. And I think, Bill, they're busy. And so it's like, one more thing to do. And so what we do is in our learning, right, we upskill them to manage their brain under pressure, manage their emotions. We upskill them so that they can actually have a hard conversation and they can dig into the hard stuff, the last 8%. That's the learning component. But then we give them this 4-week sprint. And in this case, it is, us giving them, so for 4 consecutive weeks, I'll just describe it quickly. In their team meetings, already existing team meetings, they have 20, 25 minutes where they show a short video, 5-minute video. First week is all about the culture map. Then we give them 3 questions to ask the team, hey, where are we on the map? What are we doing well? What could we improve, right? Then they have an opportunity to build or to choose a commitment. And that's all it is, 20 or 25 minutes. And we do that for 4 consecutive team meetings, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. The idea is that we want them to own it. So we're giving them a structure to own it. And the conversations, our clients have said, the conversations that are coming out of those, that sprint discussions are just like some of the best they've ever had. And it's so exciting to see, because in a very short amount of time. Remember, we talked about this earlier, the short amount of learning, the least amount of learning, we're having a big impact. And now we're creating cultures on teams where they can do hard things, where you can outperform your competition, right? And if you do this over the course of a month, everyone in the organization, which is how we built this, you can change your culture in months, not years. And that to us is our value proposition. That's what we're so excited to share. And, this is, Adrian mentioned, like, we're in the middle of, this transformation, as you might know, if you're a client of ours. We've changed our website, and we're really excited about this impact that we're having. And we would like just to say to you, come join us. If you want more information of how we can help you change the hard stuff from something to avoid to know your biggest opportunity to transform, we're happy to talk with you. And so, Bill, maybe what we could do is, if anyone has questions,
We're just looking at time. Can we go to that last slide so we can just let people know?
Sure.
So yeah, I want to say huge thanks to everyone for joining us on the webinar. As you can tell, we're pretty passionate, pretty excited about this. After this webinar, you will receive a recording of the webinar. So if you want to go back and review it or share it with someone, you will get a copy of the culture map. I know most people look at that, and when you're in programs, people are taking pictures of it. It's very valuable. If you are interested in going a little deeper with it, we do have an exercise that you can actually do with your teams. We're happy to connect with you and walk you through that. So you'll be given an invitation to work with one of our leadership consultants to walk you through that. JP has a great podcast called The Last 8% Morning. So if you want to work on your own ability to model and show up in your last 8% moments skillfully, it's a great podcast. It's meant to be a walking podcast. And he does some, walking meditation at the beginning, some mental training exercises. It's a really great podcast. Finally, JP and I are active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with either of us. We're JP Pawliw Bill Benjamin, and of course our company, Institute for Health and Human Potential. And by the way, we love getting questions, challenge us with something, share an example of something. We love hearing from you all. By the way, you will be getting a survey. In fact, I think Adrian's shared it in the chat. You will be getting a survey, and finally, so please fill that out. Robert, great news. Thank you. You love the podcast. So finally, huge thanks to Olivia and Adrian for helping organize this. They do an awesome job, and a big thank you to all of you for joining us here for this hour. And we wish you all a fantastic day, and I hope we get an opportunity to work together going forward. So bye, everyone. Thank you.